So the Beastmen have arrived, and you're wondering if they're worth the purchase. Retailing at $19 US, Call of the Beastmen is one of the most expensive DLCs Creative Assembly has ever offered. About 20% more than Rome 2 expansions like Hannibal at the Gates and Caesar and Gaul. If you know anything about Games Workshop or Warhammer, this price shouldn't really come as a surprise to you. GW gets a cut of the profits for Total War Warhammer, so to maintain or increase profit margin on an IP that doesn't belong to them, CA is going to have to increase the price of their DLC when compared to previous games. Not to mention modeling bipedal cow and goatmen, and elves and treekin and dragons and such is simply more complicated, time-consuming, and expensive than just modeling humans with different armor or shield patterns, like in previous historical Total Wars. With all of that said, the choice of whether to buy this product or not is largely going to come down to a couple of factors you probably already considered. Are the Beastmen fun? Are they a unique, interesting faction with their own playstyle and cool unit roster? And is the amount of content CA included in this pack worth 20 bucks? I'll try my best to answer those questions in a minute, but your enjoyment of this faction in campaign is really going to come down to whether or not you enjoy the horde mechanics from Attila that carried over to the Warriors of Chaos in Total War Warhammer. If you like horde gameplay, if you thoroughly enjoyed your Chaos campaign playthrough, and you're looking for an even faster paced balls-to-the-wall play session, Beastmen will absolutely be worth your money. If you dislike horde mechanics and playstyle, and prefer factions that are landed and can take control of settlements, then the Beastmen probably won't be for you, unless you're a multiplayer only kind of guy, in which case, just wait a minute, I'll talk about the unit roster and their potential viability in multiplayer in a bit. There are a lot of cool mechanics that have been added to the Beastmen campaign. Yes, some of them are absolutely reskinned, taken from other factions and given a slight twist, like the WoW mechanic and fighting this meter for the Greenskins, given to the Beastmen as a Brayherd horde. But some are new, like the Chaos Moon mechanic, where every time the Chaos Moon Morslib waxes full, you get a choice between massive replenishment bonuses, horde growth, movement range, and increased unit experience, all with some serious trade-offs that make the decision worthwhile and interesting to make. Do I get instant replenishment next turn for all of my units, but lose an entire level of horde growth, making it harder for me to build buildings? Or do I get the cost of skill upgrade, which gives new recruits tons of experience chevrons at the cost of doubling their recruitment price? Each of these can be very useful in their own situations, and I really like the mechanic. The Beastmen play fast and hard and dirty. They default as an ambushing race in a stance called, fittingly, Beastmen Ambush, and you'll have a chance to ambush your opponent on a unique Beastway map anytime you attack an opponent in this default stance. These battles are brutal and over extremely quickly the majority of the time. As you can imagine, being surrounded by screaming goat dudes and massive minotaurs rampaging through your lines can be pretty terrifying and will often cause a mass rout. I like the Beastway maps. They add some variety and flavor to the game and were definitely a very nice addition. But I think ultimately, for a lot of people, the unit roster is the most important feature of any Total War DLC or expansion. Certainly in a game like Warhammer with so much variety between factions and so many cool monsters and gameplay styles to choose from, the units a race can field are really important. As a general rule, the Beastmen are low armor, high mobility troops with Vanguard deployment, meaning they can deploy outside of their own deployment zone and hide pretty much anywhere on the map. This of course isn't true for the monster units like Minotaurs and Cygors and Giants and Chaos Spawn. They're way too big and noisy, but for more than half of the Beastmen units currently in the game, they can use Vanguard deployment. What this means is your gameplay style is very, very similar to the way the Beastmen wage war in the lore. And in that way, I think Creative Assembly has done them a lot of justice. They are not meant to be extremely tanky troops who grind you down over time. They're not meant to have a lot of armor. They strike hard and they strike fast, and hopefully overpower and rout their opponent very quickly before melting back into the shadows of the forest. And if your opponent's lines happen to hold their ground, and their ranged units are given time to fire, or their better armor and morale keeps them in the fight past that first massive attack, your Beastmen army might be in trouble. That low armor value is going to hurt you in drawn-out melee combat, and your weaker morale can definitely cause mass routing in your Brayherd. Of course, it entirely depends on the list you're running. A Minibus core with Gorbel support has a ton of killing and staying power, but is also expensive to field, and prone to getting you focus fired and shot to pieces by factions like Bretonia or the Empire. I'll say it right now, Minotaurs are my favorite monster unit in the game now, hands down. They are an absolute joy to use. They're fast, they hit like a Mack truck, they have a unique goring animation, actually a lot of them, with their horns, and a unique charge animation as well. And they can easily get over 150 kills if you take care of them and send them into the right targets. In terms of multiplayer viability, I'm a little dubious of how good the Beastmen will actually be. Vanguard deployment has always been a little gimmicky in Total War. It can certainly win you battles, especially against the AI, but a competent opponent is going to prepare for it and keep a close eye on the minimap for when you spring the ambush or simply just scout it out with fast cavalry units. Low armor and morale for some of their core units definitely hurts them as a faction, but Bestigors and Minotaurs are very solid, and Ungor Spearmen are very cost efficient in terms of meat shielding and tying down enemy units, so the monsters can close in and do their damage. I love the Cygor, very cool animations on it with the boulders it throws and uses in melee combat, but probably not going to see it too much in competitive play, I don't think. Just a bit expensive for its current killing power, I feel, but remember that I've only played with a handful of opponents on the Beastmen patch, so I would not be surprised at all if some of my initial impressions proved incorrect as the meta evolves. I do believe that players will find viable builds for the Beastmen in multiplayer, but going off past history, low armor ambush factions like the Pix and Attila don't generally perform at a high level against competent opponents. With all of that said, campaign is the most important feature for a lot of you, and this ambushing quick strike style play is very unique and does make for very interesting and fun battles in campaign. The Beastmen is just a reskin chaos argument, doesn't really hold any sway in terms of their battle playstyle or mechanics at all in my opinion. They play nothing like chaos other than the fact that they have monsters and are a rush faction. Where chaos is a heavily armored, inexorable but slow deathball that moves right at you, the Beastmen are quick, and they're agile, and they flank, and want to ambush you more than anything. And then, of course, eat you for dinner because blood for the blood god, but that's not even mentioning the fact that Beastmen do indeed have new skeletons and backwards articulating joints that don't exist for any current unit, and that they have unique animations as well. You can certainly make a good argument that some of their campaign mechanics are reused and reskinned, but if you call the unit roster itself a reskin, I don't think you frankly know what that word means. Now, we all know about the missing units. You guys know how I feel about it. I made a video about it, got a lot of views and plenty of interesting and insightful feedback. I understand the increase in price with the contract with GW and all that, but I do feel, and I stand by this argument that I made, I feel that unit rosters like the Beastmen should be more complete if they're going to charge a premium price like $19 for a faction DLC. I think missing Doom Bulls, Tuskor Chariots, Wargors, Harpies, which would have opened up a lot of aerial battle tactics and would have been very useful for the Beastmen, Jabberslice, and Gorgons is too much missing for the current price. If Creative Assembly does not plan to add any of these units down the line free of charge. Now, my whole outlook on this aspect changes if Doom Bulls and Gorgons and possibly Morgor the Shadowgave as a third legendary lord suddenly appear later down the line. The good news is that the Russian data mining that has so far predicted DLC content correctly states that the Beastmen will indeed be getting extra units alongside the Wood Elf DLC in 2 to 3 months. Now, of course, the data mining has a tiny sample size of release content so far, so I'm not ready to go all in on that and say the data mining is right about everything yet, but it does seem like getting more Beastmen units is a definite possibility, which would be great and would definitely change my outlook on the overall opinion of the DLC. I've said it before, I think not adding a playable Middenland with Boris Todbringer as a playable lord was a mistake. The rivalry between Khazrak and Boris Todbringer is legendary, and in my mind classifies as iconic, similar in nature to the three-way war between Queek, Skarsnik, and Belagar for Karak 8 Peaks. It is iconic in Warhammer lore. So not adding multiplayer campaign or head-to-head functionality was definitely a mistake and missed opportunity, in my opinion. And of course, there's simply those players who want to try the mini-campaign but prefer playing as the Empire or the good factions, and they can't do that now because the Beastmen are the only playable faction in an eye for an eye campaign. I think there is a distinct lack of replayability in the eye for an eye campaign. I think that it's a cool idea and the campaign itself is fun, but it's going to be one of those things that you go in and do one time. After you've beaten it, there's no reason to not go to the Grand Campaign and try out the Beastmen there or play a different faction. The Grand Campaign is simply way larger in scope, and I think that when people want to play a Warhammer campaign, they're going to want to do it on the Grand Campaign more so than in a mini campaign that you might just play once and then not play again. The mini campaign itself is pretty similar to what you'd expect from Caesar and Gaul and Hannibal at the Gates. There are events and attempts to world build and add snippets of lore and flavor into the campaign, but it isn't massively narrative driven. It's ultimately still a sandbox campaign where you have objectives. It just happens to be more focused and in a smaller part of the world. I think some people will have a ton of fun with the mini campaign, but for plenty of other people, I think the Grand Campaign will be where they spend most of their time with the Beastmen. And of course, a lot of you argue, and I can't disagree with you, that it would have been nice if the mini campaign was bundled separately. I know CA has their reasons for doing it that way. Doesn't mean we have to agree with them. Now, I do have to give props to CA for their support of the game so far. These patches have been introducing new content, like tons of new free maps, and the ability to now kit your lords and heroes out in multiplayer, which is a great step in the right direction towards Avatar Conquest possibly making a return, which would be amazing. You guys know how I feel about that. I would love to see Avatar Conquest return to multiplayer. The Amber Wizard, the Jade Griffin, and his spell, Transformation of Kadon, which summons a feral manticore, is a welcome addition to the game. Very cool free content. And then the maps themselves, Stir River, Kelp and Coal Dust, and the Fall of Man are very cool looking new maps. Although they do continue to show off really cool terrain and map features that are just barely off of the map, which is really kind of frustrating. I would love if CA started incorporating some of these beautiful features they worked so hard on to model, like the Burning Empire settlement and Herdstone on Kelp and Coal Dust, into the actual playable map itself so that players could battle over it. I just think if they're taking the time to model these awesome choke points and battle features and terrain features, they should let players actually use them on the battlefield maps themselves. But anyways, final verdict. I'm already over 10 hours with the Beastmen in multiplayer and campaign, and I've thoroughly enjoyed playing with them so far. I think $2 per hour of entertainment is a fantastic investment, and that price is going to continue to go down the more hours I play with them. The more hours I sink in, the less money it costs per hour. I think that their unique playstyle and units are worth a purchase if you have disposable income and plan on doing a campaign. Campaigns can last anywhere from 5 to 20, 30. I know some people have done 50-hour campaigns. So it really depends on how much you want to put into it, and of course how much you think the Beastmen are fun. With that said, though, more power to you if you want to wait and buy it on sale or simply think there are way too many missing units to justify the price. I don't necessarily disagree with you on that idea, but I think this had the potential to be one of the best DLCs Creative Assembly has ever released, especially if they had been given their full army book roster at launch and allowed multiplayer campaign functionality and other playable factions in an eye for an eye. And I think that Call of the Beastmen doesn't quite hit that high mark, in my opinion, because of those design decisions to not include multiplayer campaign functionality, to not include the full roster yet. And hopefully CA adds the Gorgon and some of these missing units later down the line. I do think they are important to the faction. I do think they will make them more fun to play, but I will say the Beastmen are a lot of fun right now. Their playstyle is unique and it is interesting, and their campaign has been enjoyable in my opinion. And I think it's likely that a lot of these new units will be added, given the level of support they've shown in terms of additional content and patching so far. But the Beastmen, again, do look and feel unique. They are a blast to play in multiplayer and campaign, and if you like their aesthetic and aggressive playstyle, I don't think you'll be disappointed sinking a couple meals worth of dinero into this DLC. 7 out of 10 is my arbitrary final verdict. There are definitely some downsides to this DLC. Some will think that it's a deal breaker, that they can't buy it because they're missing units, and I definitely understand where you guys are coming from. At the same time, I think that if you guys tried out the Beastmen campaign and the faction in multiplayer, you would thoroughly enjoy playing them. But if you did not like the Chaos campaign or Horde mechanics of Attila, definitely do not pick this up. Don't think it'll be worth it for you. Although there are mods, of course, that allow Chaos and other factions that are normally Hordes to settle and live in cities. So the modding community is, of course, a great outlet for the Beastmen as well, and should help them out in terms of their campaign, if that's what you're into. Otherwise, I think it's worth the money for those of you who like Total War and have time to kill and disposable income, and you might be able to pick it up on Green Man Gaming or third-party sites for a bit cheaper than what you can get it for on Steam. So might want to check those out on Google. Thanks for watching. The Week of the Beastmen is here. Collaborations with a lot of YouTubers you guys know will be coming very soon.